All right. Welcome, everyone. Thank you for joining us for today's webinar titled Low Code Platform, the CIO's secret solution to agility and flexibility in the new normal. My name is Peter Kim from the Zinier team, and joining me today is our speaker, Robert Hancock. Just a little housekeeping before we get started. If you have any questions during the presentation, please type them into the question box in your Zoom control panel. We will have some time for questions at the end. In addition, we are recording the session and we will make it available for everyone within a few days' time. Now, without further ado, we will turn the time over to Robert.
Thanks, everybody. Thanks so much, Peter. So again, my name is Robert Hancock, and we're going to spend some time today talking about low-code solutions and how they might affect your organization and its effectiveness in delivering service. So again, my name is Robert Hancock. I run the regional Southeast regional area for Zinier here in the U.S. And I've been in the field service industry for, I don't know, somewhere around a dozen years. And so hopefully I'll be able to give you guys some value for your time today. So let's talk briefly about what our agenda is going to be. We're going to talk about the agility imperative, driving agility with low-code solutions, and also a little bit about Zinier at the end, just so you understand who we are and how we can help you in these ways. So why don't we go ahead and get started and talk about the agility imperative. I know that many of you have heard the phrase, the new normal. You know, we've all been stuck at home. You can see here I'm in my upstairs break room where my wife has shunned me to from our work at home time here. So there's a lot about life and our work that is different and will probably be different forever. And we can't really tell what the future might hold for us or even field service. But we do benefit from being able to see some of the things that customers and other partners are doing in the market to give us a good feel for observations on what the new normal for field service might be and that we can look forward to. So we're going to cover those in three areas. You know, field service organizations have historically haven't been known to be very agile. You know, they work in fairly tight silos. There's a lot of what I'll call concrete consistency, and that is these things that have been formalized, and any type of attempt to change those is met with a really firm no. And really, if we're going to respond to the market and do a good job as service advocates for our customers, we have to be more flexible. You know, these siloed strategies, these outdated technologies that have really helped us just get by, they've really got to be reevaluated. And as we look to help our companies and our customers become more competitive, to be differentiators to their competitors, really you start to look at agility as being a key reason that they can differentiate themselves from the others. And so we're going to talk through three of these areas with regard to agility. The first is meeting customer demands. The second is operational readiness. And the third is technology evaluation and use. So let's go ahead and start with meeting customer demands. So we see this little graph that we've created here, agility and meeting customer demands. You know, in order to do that, in order to be agile in our meeting of our customer demands, we have to start by making sure that we are very good at gathering data from what the clients want. You know, how are we understanding what the market's doing if we're not listening well to those customers or prospective customers? We also have to really, after we've done a good job at collecting that data, really determine the strategy and align operations on how we're going to deliver against those needs. And again, some creativity's got to be involved. And then finally, we have to have the visibility into the field to make sure that you know, everyone in the field is following the guidelines. You know, these are the places where agility becomes important. You know, if we use an example in the utility space where you might be a smart meter installer, you might have a great amount of data from your customers that they really value the ability to self-serve or to create appointments for themselves online. So you've asked for this feedback and you've gotten it, but now your organization can't deliver on that for 12, 18, sometimes 24 months. The reality of that is by the time you deliver that some 18 months later, their demands might have changed. What's worse is that your competitors might have actually solved those demands before you do and left you hanging with customers that are dissatisfied. So let's move on now to talk about operational readiness. So you see two little blocks here. The one on the right, obviously, if you had to choose one of these pictures, would not be the preferable one. Nobody wants to have their head stuck in I guess that's a mason jar that's been jammed over this guy's head and he's drowning. The reality is the only way that you can quickly and effectively execute on demands that you feel in the market is if your business operations are aligned very tightly. We see on the left-hand side where these people are getting together, they're collaborating to make good decisions and put those puzzle pieces together, where this guy on the right is obviously drowning in his own individuality. You need to create a culture where evolving and optimizing processes is more fluid, rather than kind of once in a decade exercise that comes along when you have a new COO or a new CEO, and you've got to get these massive groups together to make these decisions. And we've all been in those meetings before, right? They last forever. They don't necessarily have a concrete outcome, and they're not really agile. To really be able to make ongoing changes and tweaks to your business process, you need to make sure that your company is all working towards that core set of objectives, and that you view service as a strategic arm for growth in that company, and that opinion is not just shared by operational leadership, but also shared by top leadership of the company all the way up to the C-suite. You also have to manage change so that your employees become more comfortable with the process of evolving on a continuous basis and embrace their ability to take key insights and drive them and their opinions into the change process. So that's operational readiness. Now we want to talk a little bit about technology and its use. So this third core really involves a different view of the world when it comes to technology. We think about the typical waterfall process of initiating an idea and begin to creating it, building a prototype that people can look at, gathering feedback to create more of a final product, and then implementing that solution and going live. This is a very slow process. And in many cases in the field service industry, we see this being done over a 9, 12, and sometimes 15-month time frame. I'm going to give you a use case example here of waterfall versus agile. I sold low-code mobile applications in another position years ago, and we happened to interact with the U.S. Navy. The Navy had a challenge that they wanted to change the kneeboard applications for their pilots. This is an application that's used by the pilots in lieu of a book of checklists and all these other things that they need to do before they take off in a plane. We happened to meet a group of people on the Admiral, actually on a golf course, where he was talking about he had been working on this project with a large defense contractor for about 15 months at that point. So we got into dialogue, and I said, well, have you ever considered doing something really using a low-code solution, et cetera? And he said, that's interesting. So he gave me the spec of that application, and within a week and a half, we were able to deliver him an example of that, what we called an MVP, or minimal viable product. And he came back and said, that's more than I've seen from this company that we've spent $1 million on in that period of time. You did it in less than a week and a half. That's an example of how agile development can really help you to iterate. Now, the key part of agile is this constant feedback, right, where you gather requirements, you design a quick application for them to try, and then you gather feedback and deploy. That can all happen in a very condensed time frame, and we'll talk about how when we go into some of the low-code options later. But the reality is, as you become more agile, it's not just about being fast, but it's being iterative and taking good feedback from the market, from your employees, so that you can constantly reinvent this and actually having the organizational emphasis on creativity, right, to be able to respond to these needs faster as time goes along. So let's move on and talk a little bit about how you can drive agility with low-code solutions. So the first of these is to think about what Gartner has said about low-code. By 2024, low-code application development will be responsible for more than 65% of application development activity. That's a big number, 65%. Now, you may not understand low-code, and we're going to talk about it a little bit. Low-code is more or less a visual approach to software development. Low-code abstracts and automates every step of the application lifecycle to enable rapid delivery of a variety of software solutions. and it breaks that traditional silos of businesses and IT to promote continuous collaboration. There's a significant increase in demand for software solution and a shortage of skilled developers. And so that's really driven a lot of the development of low-code platforms over time. So let's talk about low-code and how it makes development easier. I want to give you guys an example of something that's probably useful from real life. Just today, I met with the guy that takes care of my yard, and we really have two options available to me in my backyard, which is a very shady area, doesn't get any sun, it stays fairly wet, and I really have a challenge getting grass to grow back there. And so he said, okay, we've got two options. We can seed or sod. And so we went through those options, talked about what seeding meant. It meant, going in, plugging the yard, putting down fertilizer, putting the seed, watering it constantly. The other option is that we wait about a month and he comes in and just lays sod down and I just turn my sprinklers on. That's an example of how you can look at low code. If you think about writing code from scratch, it's very much like spreading seed and fertilizer. It's very manual, very labor intensive. But instead, I'm taking these already built blocks of grass and putting them in my yard, thus making it a lot faster. Now, some of the capabilities that explain why developing apps in low codes is so much faster is that first and foremost, you have these pre-built interfaces and models and logic that can basically be graphically drag and dropped into a workflow to make an application complete. Rather than having 3,000 lines of code, you might have 300 lines of code and 10 building blocks that you start with. These also enable you to have easy to implement APIs and connectors that integrate with third parties. So these pre-built connectors can then be aligned and connected to the available APIs of the other applications so that, again, you don't have to go out and write raw code or have a developer do the work. And most of the time, these have one-click application delivery, meaning as soon as you get done, you hit a button and you can use it on your phone or use it on your device. It manages that whole process of delivery and versioning and all those parts of the process that might be more painful when you do it from a standard coding environment. So let's move on and talk about the specific benefits of low code, and we're going to go through these. So the first benefit you might find is speed. So this makes software development as much as 10 times faster than traditional methods. I used the example earlier about the US Navy. It actually was more like, 300 times faster to do it that way. We ended up capturing that project for the Navy, and within about 3 months, we had delivered a final project to the US Navy. And the net cost to the Navy was about a tenth of what they had paid that previous vendor who actually hadn't delivered anything completely. The second of those is agility. This enables you to respond to the business demands faster and more efficiently. To go back to that example of the Navy, one of the processes that they had was because the planes that were being supported by this application had a major software update. And so there was a different checklist that needed to be done. In a traditional development environment, you'd have to go back to that raw code. You'd have to extract the lines that were affected, rewrite those, retest them, and go through that whole process that the waterfall development would entail. In the low-code environment, they were able to simply drag and drop new items into that workflow and have that changed, and do that within a number of days. Multi-experience can then be made easy. This is the experience that you might have on a Windows tablet versus an Apple phone or an Android phone or an Android tablet. The reality is by using these environments, you can actually produce a solution that works across multiple environments and produces code that is native to those devices. Innovation for all. The reality of being limited to enterprise is not there anymore. There was a time where low-code solutions were something that only people like Google thought about or Amazon. But right now, your smallest of companies, we've seen, and I'm sure you've seen the advertisement for these do-it-yourself website applications. I've actually seen a website that was built by a young lady who owns a flower shop. And the flower shop website that she built was as good as any flower shop website I'd ever seen in my life. And this is a young lady who has no development experience and simply likes to cut flowers. That is the power of technology. It can now be made available downstream to people of any size and any type of company. And then we have this concept of shadow IT. You know, it says business users who are developing simple apps with low code can follow best practices during application development, right? You don't have to concern yourself with having this IT organization that's too busy or that doesn't have time for your project or they're caught up on an ERP upgrade. The reality is that a savvy business user can utilize a low-code platform to manage an application themselves rather than losing and creating that dissonance between the business case and IT. Now, I have a lot of folks in the IT environment that love these applications as well because it just allows them to solve problems faster. Here at Zinier, we've seen that implementations happen a lot faster with our platform than it does with our competitors, simply because you can make these changes quickly to respond to the needs of the customer. And these are some of the core that you get from all of them: more efficient development process, faster time to market for the system and tools, increase in innovation, and fewer technology problems. That fewer technology problems is something that you shouldn't take for granted, because the reality of it is, with all of these mixed device environments where you have to support multiple operating systems and multiple device types, when you're manually writing application or manually updating them, you have the challenge of dealing with the updates of those applications as well. These low-code solutions traditionally handle all that for you, so that when you deliver a product, you know that it's going to live on those other devices without a challenge. So let's go ahead and talk through the next step here, and that is how low-code helps developers. So again, we talked about how it might have some capability for a business user to involve. But let's now talk about actually how these tools can be used to effectively assist an IT environment, a developer. So some developers have viewed low code as a threat to their role to software quality. But as these things have matured, developers have begun to see, actually, no, this is actually going to allow me to focus my time on the things that I love to do. And that is being creative, solving problems, but using a tool that's going to help me do that faster. The first benefit to that organization is less drudgery. In most applications, only about 10% of the code is truly unique. Low code enables developers to focus their skills where they are most needed, removing some of that repetitive coding that drives them insane. The next one is that new developers can get up to speed faster. We already know that in the IT environment, development resources are scarce. New developers can come on board and gain full productivity a lot faster using the low-code tools. You don't necessarily have to wait for 3 to 6 months for these people to get up to speed and figure out how you do things at your company, because the tool is going to help them do that as well. In many cases, they require less training, the architecture, etc. This approach also helps development teams to grow and diversify more smoothly, so they can bring in a larger culture of people and help them. We talked about this a little bit before, but typically there are fewer problems with this consistently generated code. We could go back to my grass analogy earlier. If you're actually deploying, an acre of grass in your backyard, you can tell pretty quickly if that grass looks great when it shows up on the pallet. And you know that each piece of that grass came from the same ground, so it's not any different than one another. The same thing can be applied to these code that gets automatically generated. It's already been tested, right? So if we have a button on an app that automatically calls a phone number, you can test that button in and of itself 1,000 times and it works every time. If you then reuse that piece of code over and over again, you know that your risk of that not working is drastically minimized. Enhanced job security. We see in the environment that these low-code enabled developers actually build faster. They do it with less defects, and they speed their release cycles. So this gives them the opportunity to impress their boss and impress their company, so that they can actually feel more secure that they're doing an effective job. Advanced learning. If you're taking all the standard blocking and tackling and boring parts of application development and you're doing that automatically, that enables you to focus on really more advanced capabilities and learning and growing and figuring out artificial intelligence and how to attack the top business objectives that are out there that you need to help solve. The next area is less isolation and more clarity. I'm sure you guys have all felt this at some point when you're here at home. You're not going into an office, you can't go visit clients, you get isolated. The development environment is like that naturally. If any of you guys have ever done development or worked around developers, they tend to get very tuned into a single thing, and they don't interact necessarily as much as others in the business world might. By using these solutions together in a collaborative environment, you find that they grow with one another. Their teamwork increases, and they're less isolated away from the corporate objectives and the objectives that you're trying to accomplish with the application as a whole. So we've covered some of these topics, and now I want to briefly talk about a little bit about Gartner and a little bit about Zinier. And so let's first start with this little graph here. As you can see on the bottom right-hand side, this is a Gartner report that's really talking about the emerging technologies that are going to have the biggest impact on business and on field service in the future. And as you can see, right there in the center is low-code application platform. Right, and that's exactly what we're talking about today. You also have artificial intelligence and some other information here that fits into our conversation as well. Now, what you see out to the left is actually the Zinier low-code environment, where you can see a drag-and-drop interface where one might create a workflow for a work order and immediately go and change that. I want to use you an example to illustrate this in a field service view. So we actually, on the phone with a prospect, last week had this example that they brought up. When COVID first started, they actually had to develop a COVID check form so that before their field service technicians went on site, they went through a checklist. Did I take my temperature today? Have I experienced a fever or cough or any other symptoms recently? Take a picture of themselves wearing their gear. They were using another solution and said that actually you're right, that takes us a long time to do with this current solution because we have to potentially put in a change request, we have to work with a vendor, we don't necessarily know if they support this change, we're replacing this form within the workflow. During that presentation, one of our technicians that manages our Zinier application actually built that form, added it to the workflow, and had it deployed within less than 2 minutes. That's the effect that you can have on the business, on demand, all the time with these types of technologies. Now, we can look at these configuration builders, right? This is where you have these blocks of pre-built code, these forms, these checklists, whatever that function needs to be, inventory check, whatever thing that you might need. And then you can actually use those to very quickly build mobile web pages, build mobile application pages, and manage integration so that you can actually be constantly innovating with the new technologies available within your application. Another one of those areas that helps through low code is the rapid app deployment. You have these data model builders, and I'm going to point down to the right, and I want to introduce you guys to that. So that frame that you see, the colored blocks, that's actually what you call the app store within Zinier. We had a meeting with a customer where he was talking about how now he understands when they go meet with a new customer and talk to them about how they can support them in servicing them, they can actually come in here and take their core application, copy it, edit it for that particular prospect, and go into their sales call to try and get new services business and demonstrate to them how their service is going to look, what the page that their customers are going to log into to request service, what the application is going to look like for technicians as they work through their defined workflow that they want to do. In this case, it's in the technology sector supporting things like tower services. And so these can actually really help you not just grow internally, but actually use as a part of your business acumen. You can have workflow simulators where you can go through and test out these scenarios so that, okay, I want to put myself in the position of the field technician. Let's see what that experience is going to be like from A to Z to make sure that it works, to make sure that it makes sense, and to review it with the senior leadership to make sure they confirm, yes, this is indeed what we expect from our technicians in the field. And then you have the whole capability of managing the version control, the conflict management, and the application ecosystem as a whole. Right? You don't have to go to 9 different places to do a release. You don't have to go figure out how am I going to have an effect over here on the mobile web versus the application itself. It can all be done in this rapid app deployment scenario. And again, we talked about this use case of the app store. This field service elements that we have, and those are all the core blocking and tackling field service capabilities, dispatch and scheduling and just-in-time scheduling, drip trickle scheduling, whatever you want to call it. These are all pre-built applications that are there that can then be customized for your use case. Now, having come from other organizations in the field service industry, this is kind of strange to me. It was when I first joined Zinier. The typical process for deploying a field service application, again, in the market is 6, 9, 12 months. And so I was initially shocked when I heard that we took 2 to 3 months. And then after I heard it from customers, I learned the reason why. The reality is that most field service applications only do about 60, 65% of what you want them to do out of the box and how you need them to perform to effectively deliver service in your way. By using these low-code environments, you can actually configure the application your way very quickly. So your time to value goes up substantially because you're able to make those changes on the fly, not depend on the vendor to release those things to you, and not have to go out and pay a stranger or go out and do an RFI for an implementation partner, because all these things are available at your fingertips. So not only can you edit the use cases that exist, you can build brand new use cases from scratch that can be deployed. So the reality is the limit is your imagination. So that's all we've got today. I thought I would finish in about 30 minutes, so it looked like I did that. My name is Robert Hancock. If you guys have any questions about these environments or use cases, feel free to email me at robert.hancock@zinier.com. And if you guys have any questions, we'll go ahead and go through as many of those as we can in our last few minutes here. You can type those into the Q&A dialog box as you like. So the first question I have here is, what is the difference between a low-code solution and a highly configurable solution? That's actually a funny question. Highly configurable solution basically means you can write code to change it. And you hear that in the marketplace where they say that I can enable you to do that. The reality of that is that's just a way to tell you that this application, in order to make it yours, is going to cost you a lot of time and a lot of money. Highly configurable, yes, but not easily configurable. You really don't necessarily hear that often. So you're going to have a lot of code. It's going to have to be tested. It's going to have to go through that same waterfall process that you've typically seen, and it's not agile. A low-code solution is actually that predictability, that dependability, that enabled creativity with the tool to help you do that as you see fit. Here's the next question. Does it have to have an IT person who manages it, or can it be operations? So it can be both. Yesterday we were on the phone with a gentleman who was an operations person, but considered himself a geek, and I'm using his words, not mine. He would actually be a really good person. In fact, we told him that when we were on the phone with him, that you're probably going to be the person that has to manage this. Sometimes, though, your operational people, maybe they're not so good at managing a spreadsheet and not so good at editing a PowerPoint, but you may want to lean on your IT people to do that. Here's another question. What if we have unique use cases and our field service elements don't match our use case? Actually, I think I discussed that earlier. I'll discuss it again. We're not looking to match your use case out of the box with the Zinier solution. We're looking to give you the capability to match your process in our application with ease and with agility, and we can do that as well. You mentioned low code. What kind of coding skills are typically required for these low code environments? It's usually a little bit of JSON. That's typically the area that that's what we use. If you can do JSON, and it's a fairly easy one to do, it's typical web code, you can find that as well. Here's another question. Does Zinier provide dev sandboxes to test different solutions? Absolutely. You have all of that in the back office application to create as many application environments as you like, to create testing scenarios and all those other things. Here's another question. Do you think writing code is going to disappear? Well, I don't have that crystal ball, but I could tell you no, because as soon as I say yes, someone will come up with a new language and a new use case. And if you've ever been in technology, these folks are constantly looking to outdo themselves. My first experience writing code was engineering code back at Clemson University, so to give it a little bit of plug. I learned how to write some code in 1992. And I can promise you that code that I was using at the time doesn't exist anymore. In fact, I can't remember the name of it right now. I'm sure it'll come to me after this event. So it's constantly reinventing itself. The unique thing about using a low-code environment is those low-code environments can actually progress with that technology as it grows to give you new options and new capabilities. So that looks like it wraps up our questions for the day. I want to thank you guys again. We are recording this event today, and if you'd like a copy of that recording, feel free to respond to your reminder email and request it. You can email me directly at robert.hancock@zinier.com. And we thank you guys and wish you a great rest of the day.